So factoring by grouping is just a method of factoring where you group terms together. That's it. So the key thing here is whenever you are grouping them, so it's a method of factoring where you group terms, your terms have to be split evenly. And that's the key thing here. Okay. So if I look at this and I told you to factor it, this would go back to set up my x, sum to -7, because remember, sum to b, product is a times c, 1 times 12 is just 12. So what numbers add to give you -7, but multiply to give you +12? Well, that makes -3 and -4. And although a is 1 and you can do the shortcut, remember the long way is where you have to split up your middle term and break that down into -3x minus 4x plus 12. And now we have 4 terms and we're going to group them together. And that right there is factoring by grouping. I had 3 terms, so I made it into 4 terms because 4 can be split in 2. So then we look at the first half, and what can you take out? X. What are you left with? X minus 3. What are you going to take out of the second half? -4. So you're left with x minus 3. So one of your factors is x minus 3, and your other factor is x minus 4. And remember, you could change that. I could say x minus 4 times x minus 3. But that's factoring by grouping. The long way is factoring by grouping. That's it. So if I take a look at this one, it's not x squared, it's x cubed. It's in standard form, which I need to check. Is the highest exponent first, and do they decrease? Yes. 4 can be split in half, so go ahead and group them. Split it in half. And ask yourself, what can you take out of the first half? Well, 2x cubed and x squared only have x squared in common. And when I take that out, just think, what's 2x cubed if I take out an x squared? Well, then that would go away, and I'd be left with just 2x minus x squared taken out of x squared is just going to be 1. Okay, group it. Then I have to look at the second half. Well, what am I going to take out of the second half? They have a 5, but I want a positive first and then a negative. So I'm going to take out a -5, and then I'm left with 2x minus 1. So I have the same thing here and here, which goes back to this problem where we had the same thing here and here. So I'm done. Okay, I just write it down. 2x minus 1 is one of my factors. My other factor is x squared minus 5. My other one's 2x minus 1. That's it. So I have a quadratic factor and I have a linear factor. Quadratic because of x squared, linear because of just x. And I still want to keep that high exponent first, which is why my quadratic one goes first. There's nothing else to do, so that's it. Now, if you wanted to check this, you can go back to what we did a couple days ago, which is where you're just going to distribute and expand this out. Remember, when you multiply, that's what that is, right? Back-to-back parentheses multiplying. When you multiply it all out, I should get back what I got up there at the top. So x squared times 2x is 2x cubed. X squared times -1 is -x squared. -5 times 2x is -10x. And -5 times -1 is +5. So what I got here is what I got there. It works. That's one way that I can check it. Okay, take a look at the next one. Is it in standard form? Highest exponent decreasing? Yes. I have 4 terms, so I can split that in half. Go ahead and group it. What can you take out of the first half? X squared. What are you left with? X plus 10. And then look at the second half. 4 divided by 2 is 2, so I have 2 parts. What can I take out of the second half? A 5, and then I'm left with x plus 10. Notice I have the same thing here as I do right here. But I'm going to put my quadratic factor first, because highest exponent first. So x squared plus 5 times x plus 10. Quadratic, linear. Now, you're not always guaranteed to have a quadratic factor and a linear factor, but x squared and x to the first power, 2 and 1 make 3, which is how I get cubic up at the top. So that's just kind of a quick check. If your highest exponent is 3, then the x's exponent should add up to 3. Okay, now on this one, I have x, y, x, y, and then a constant. It doesn't matter. I can still group it up. It's really hard to do with exponents, but notice that that has an x, y, and an x. So I'm just going to roll with it. So taking a look in the first half, they're both even, 20 and 12. 4 goes into that. They both have an x, so I'm going to take out a 4x. Well, what's 20xy divided by 4x? The x is going to cancel, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. So I'm left with 5y plus 12x divided by 4x is 3. And then I have to look at the second group. 15 and 9 have 3 in common, so I can take out a 3, nothing else, and I'm left with 15 divided by 3 is 5y plus 3. If you have the same thing here and here, that means you did it correctly. And for this one, there's no putting anything first necessarily. So I'm just going to do alphabetical order and say 4x plus 3 times 5y plus 3. And in this case, I have a linear factor and a linear factor because up here, my highest exponent was the x. Y, 1 and 1 makes 2, so linear gives me quadratic. Okay, taking a look at this one. Kind of crazy, not necessarily in standard form, but that's okay, we're going to roll with it. The first thing that I notice is all of these 6's. If there's something that you can take out at the beginning, take it out at the beginning to make your numbers smaller. So I'm going to start by taking out 6. These have an A in common. Those have B in common, but there's not a variable that everything has in common. So if I take out the 6, I'm going to be left with AW minus 6AK plus B squared W minus 6B squared K. And now I'm going to go ahead and group it. So taking a look at the first half, still have the 6 out front. What do AW and 6AK have in common? A. So that's the only thing that I could take out. And when I take that out, I'm left with W minus 6K. And then I have to look at the second half. So I'm looking at this. And the only thing that that has in common is B squared. So I'm going to take out a positive B squared. And I'm left with W minus 6K. So I have the same thing here and here, which is good. So that's one of my factors. But I can't forget about the 6 I pulled out first. That's my first factor. So 6A plus B squared times W minus 6K. And then that's it. There's nothing else that I could do. If I were going to check it, I would distribute everything out and then distribute the 6 out at the end, and you will get this up here if you distribute it all the way out. That's it. Okay, take a look at this one. I start at x to the 6th plus x to the 4th plus x cubed plus x. So I notice that they all have an x in common, so take out the x, which is just going to decrease all those exponents. So you get x to the 5th plus x cubed plus x squared, and x take out an x is 1. Now group. And sometimes when I take out something at the beginning, it's better to put brackets. So if you take something out first, like what I did on that last one, put brackets, because then when you go to group it, it just differentiates between those parentheses. So brackets overall, parentheses inside. So x I took out first, bracket. What can I take out of this half? X cubed. If you have x to the 5th and you take out x cubed, you divide it out, you're left with x squared. If I have x cubed and I take away x cubed, I'm just left with 1. Okay, if I look at the second half now, I have to take something out of here. And if there's no, they don't have anything in common, take out a 1. But you need a placeholder right here. You can't just have a 0. I need a placeholder because I have 1x squared plus 1. So I got the same thing here and here. What's my very first factor? X. What's my next factor? X cubed plus 1. And then x squared plus 1. And you could leave it like that. If you wanted to put it in standard form, I could do x cubed plus 1 times x squared plus 1 times x in that descending order. But either one would work. Most people would do this way because we took an x out first, so it stays out front. So I have a cubic factor, I have a quadratic factor, and I have a linear factor. Well, 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. And what was the highest exponent on my original? 6. So that's just a quick way of checking it. Okay, we're going to pick up in the next video with these last examples. There's a couple of things you do have to be careful of on some of these problems, and we'll get into that in just a second.